Well, let's go ahead and, now that they're logged in, go ahead and get started. Thank you for introducing yourselves in the chat. As a note, we recognize that this is the Friday before the President's Day holiday. And so we know there are some either people who are able to take a vacation day today, or college campuses might be even closed or schools are closed. So we recognize that we go with the wisdom of the room of those who can join us today. And I'm sure they will be back with us again next Friday. For those who are newly joining us today, my name is Anne-Marie Sakrikoff. I'm the Chief Operating Officer for Growing Inland Achievement. Welcome. As those of you who have seen some of the emails or you got the registration link, know that this is a collaboration of community partners between the Inland Empire Community Foundation, the Inland Empire Growth and Opportunity Group. And so I'd love for Michael and Jackie to introduce themselves.
Awesome. Thanks, Anne-Marie. Good morning, everyone. It's great to see some familiar faces and also some new ones. I'm a graduate student at the UC Berkeley Goldman School of Public Policy, here working with IECF as a policy analyst on this project. So great to meet some of you and to see some of you again.
Good morning. My name is Jackie Melendez, and I am the Executive Director for IEGO. And my background, I started in January, so I'm about 6 weeks in and loving it, and glad to be here with folks like you. My background is urban and regional planning, and I've been working in business and workforce development and local government for 18 years. So excited to be in this new role and working with all of you. Thank you.
Thanks, Jackie and Michael. So one of the first things that I think we've started to do with all of these meetings is to make sure you are aware of where to find the notes for previous calls. If that's something that's of interest to you, I just dropped a link into the chat. And so for the previous calls that we've had regarding this topic, you can find both the recordings as well as the notes from those meetings at that link. Welcome to review. If you have any questions, always pop them in the chat, and we'll have time in breakout sessions here shortly to do some discussions. One of the things that I think is also important is for Michael to just do a very brief, hey, while we're talking about doing a one large regional application around this K-16 collaborative, what exactly do we know right now? Which still isn't a whole lot, but it's getting better. We have an upcoming webinar from the state next week, so we'll be able to share more about that here in just a moment. But in the meantime, Michael, if you would just, very quickly, the sort of overview for those who are joining us for the first time. I think it's important to do that level setting.
Absolutely. Thanks, Anne-Marie. And in the chat here, I'm just going to link to the DGS website that has the official information and kind of what we know so far. So just very broadly touching on what's on that website, there's $250 million on the table in competitive grant dollars. And so that's what we're here discussing. And regions are going to be able to apply. Some of the really kind of broad requirements is it has to have at least one K through 12 school district, at least one UC campus, at least one CSU campus, and at least one California Community College district. Luckily, we have all of them at the table, ready to engage, and so we're ready to go on that front. Another part of this is that the steering committee, which must be established at some point, should have at least 25% of the members be local employers, ensuring regional economic needs, and we have to commit, at least the collaborative and the initiatives must commit to at least 4 of 7 recommendations from the Recovery with Equity Task Force and report that came out in February 2021. I'll link that in the chat in just a second. And so the 7 recommendations, again, must choose 4 from the following 7. It is 1, improve faculty, staff, and administrator diversity. 2, cultivate inclusive, engaging, and equity-oriented learning environments. 3, retain students through inclusive supports. 4, provide high-tech, high-touch advising. 5, support college preparation, early credit. 6, subsidize internet access and eligible students. And 7, improve college affordability. And then the conversation for the past few weeks on this call has really been around the occupational pathways, in which we must select at least 2 of the following: 1, healthcare; 2, education; 3, business; and 4, engineering or computing. And so that's really the pieces that we're discussing. And so the requirements, we're still waiting for the RFP to drop, but we do not sure how my Spotify decided that moment to start playing music, but apologies for that. That was very random. I did not see that coming. Anyway,
it's Friday, Michael. It's all good.
Thank you. That's what I was listening to right before this. We do have some new information. I can go into that real quick, Anne Marie, if I'm not stealing any of your thunder.
No, go ahead. We'll talk about it again next steps at the end of the meeting too, but go for it.
Awesome. Okay. So next Friday, actually a week from today, there's going to be a webinar that the state is hosting at 10:30 a.m. to noon. You must register if you're interested. And that's where they're going to go into a little bit more detail and hosting a public meeting. We don't know fully what they're going to be bringing up, but some of the new information that they've released with the announcement of this meeting is that there's going to be two phases, at least two phases. Phase one round this spring for quote unquote mature existing collaboratives, and later phase two round of planning and implementation grants for collaboratives that are in the earlier stages of development. And so the webinar is going to include some of that information, as well as some of the legal requirements for the program, and provide an opportunity to ask questions. And so we've done some thinking around that. We're going to ask you a little bit about that, but we have just a little bit more information. Again, you could check that link in the chat, and I'll link the recovery with equity pieces as well.
So basically the idea being that we'll learn more from the state at a listening session at 10:30 next week. If you're not able to join, we'll have an opportunity for you to express some questions here today. If there's things that you're interested in learning about, we'll discuss. And then the intention is to do a regional debrief at 1 p.m. The same day. So next Friday, the 25th at 1 p.m., changing this meeting time to accommodate the earlier listening session from the state. And so both of those items are listed on the initial website. I'll drop it in the chat again, but it's the same, it'll be the same registration link that you've been using for this call as well. So you're all already registered. You don't need to do it again. Just know it's not at 9 a.m. It's going to be at 1 p.m. So want you to change that on your calendars just for next week. With that, as many of you have been here, we've been talking about what areas do we want to continue to focus in on in the individual pathways. We know there's a lot of really amazing things happening within the region, looking to try to figure out how we do this one regional application, and really taking into consideration what many of you would call in the education space, I know, use the phrase shovel-ready projects, right? Things that are moving forward but could expand or scale up. And so we're looking at wanting to discuss that much further at our in our breakouts, and giving ourselves plenty of time to do that. Before I open up breakout rooms, though, I just want to see if there are particular questions or thoughts, or, I mean, we've got some new people here. We've got people who've been participating before. You know, you're welcome to unmute yourself and actually join in a conversation. I know it's sometimes hard on these Zoom calls with lots of people to feel like you want to do that, but I want to make sure that we have a little bit of time, and give ourselves some space and grace to ask these questions if there are things that are popping into your mind based on what Michael had covered earlier.
Michael, what are the considerations for mature versus beginning? How do we determine if a group is mature?
That's one of my biggest questions for next week. I'm not sure.
Oh, okay. All right.
Yeah.
So that's
all we got.
Okay.
That's a great question. We'll make sure to ask it next week at the webinar.
Can I speak on that question too a little? So when this idea was being hatched last spring in the governor's office, there was a collection of about 16 to 18 programs that got together that lobbied the governor to create this pool of money. I think that number is probably whittled down to maybe 12 to 15 now. This is statewide. That are projects similar to what we have going on with the collaboration between GIA, IEGO, and other partners in the region. And when the this proposal was originally discussed, there were specific requirements put in there. So we should anticipate in the RFP what are some of those pieces, and I know that in the IE those pieces have already been met, and whether or not it's on a whole wide scale or on a sub-regional scale, that we would have all the requirements in place, and since this group, Jackie, Anne Marie, and Michael are meeting and talking, I'm going to call them the planning committee to get this ball moving forward. Have been having these conversations. We anticipate submitting one comprehensive proposal that's going to have a constellation of sub proposals in it, and that this constellation of sub proposals is going to have some connective tissue that connects all of them together to form the application that would be submitted to the state. And our goal next week is to understand how we represent that to the state, how we describe that, how we identify those key linkages between the different pieces. And our goal is to be as inclusive as we can across the region on these projects that are ready to go. The timeline for implementation is going to be a really big indicator of how shovel-ready projects need to be able to move forward. Well, but we don't know that yet, so we'll see that. The new piece, of course, is that there's this planning piece, and so the questions that we've been thinking about that: can we apply for both? Can we apply for an implementation for some projects and planning for others? We just don't know yet, and so as this RFP flows out, I think that we'll get many of those questions answered. So I'll leave it at that.
Thank you, Carlos. Any other thoughts before we move into breakout rooms?
I have a question.
Please.
So next week we're having the webinar at 10:30, and then we're regrouping again at 1
Correct.
as a group. Okay.
Correct. And the 10:30 webinar is the listening session from the state of California. We don't know what they're going to cover. They've not, put out an agenda or any of those things. The team here that Carlos referred to as sort of the planning team, we're all going to be there. So if you can't make it, shoot us a question. That's part of the call today is, find out if you're not able to make it. But we also want to say, hey, you can be there. It's, open to all of us logging in.
Okay. And then we will, after the meeting with the state, we'll regroup again at 1. Or
right. And if you can't make that one either, just like this one, we'll also be recording and
okay.
And be able to provide those notes after the fact, but intend to use that more of a debrief from what we learn and continue. We don't want to wait a whole week to then debrief of what the state said. That's why we scheduled something in the afternoon for those who can join.
Okay. Thank you.
You're welcome. Great question. I'm glad you asked me. All right, with that, then I'm going to open the rooms for you to choose. Our intention is to be discussing questions that I will pop in the chat right now. And we're going to have a little more time today. We're going to try and do this for about 20 to 25 minutes today. And if we need less time, you all can ping me if you need to. And Michael will be staying in the main room, so he'll be able to let us all know.
Can you reiterate the purpose of the breakout rooms and what we'll do after we're done with them?
Sure. So the purpose is to discuss the 2 questions that I just dropped in the chat. We want to confirm projects that are potentially scalable in the region based on your experience in working in pathways. And we also want to make sure that we're clear on others that need to be joining this group that have not already shown up. So there will be people in the space to help facilitate the breakout room and take notes. And so we're wanting to get information from you to make sure that we're engaging with as many people as we possibly can. And then when we come back, we'll be able to report out on what some insights, hopefully at least 3 insights from the individuals in the breakout rooms.
This is Alex. Just a quick question on that.
Yeah.
Are we looking at innovative, bold solutions, or we're just patching up what we already have in place, or strengthening or building capacity what we have in place?
Well, Alex, I would love to say that we always want to look at innovative and bold solutions. The concern we have at the moment is we don't know what the timeline is for this application. So we want to know both, right? What are areas that do exist that could be expanded across the region, and what are potentially new programs that you've heard about that would be useful? Remember, we're trying to connect it to the recovery with equity details. So projects that also can connect to improving student success overall, as well as they need to be within these 4 pathway areas based on the budget language. So that's those are the parameters we currently have. Any other questions before we move into the rooms?
Yeah, my last one.
Sure.
We said this is a competitive grant, right? So we're competing with the entire state of California, right?
Correct.
All right, cool.
What are you thinking, Alex?
I just want to make us look sexy for the grant. So I'm just trying to figure out.
Absolutely.
We'll put your picture on the front of it, buddy.
We're with you. We're all in agreement. I don't know if you can see all of our faces, but we're all nodding. Absolutely, Alex.
Yeah, I'm not trying to lose to Orange County. That's what I'm trying to say. All right.
Perfect. Sounds like a plan. All right, on that note, let's go into our breakout rooms and discuss some potentially innovative projects.
Insights. Let's start. Thank you. Let's start with the business group.
Does anybody from business want to give a tidbit or a takeaway?
You do a great, Jackie. So go ahead.
All right. All righty. Thank you. Okay. So what we continued our conversation from last week, where we were talking about we're starting to see a real theme with teacher pathways in the entrepreneurship space. And being able to have folks that are in the entrepreneur space be able to teach without having, a MBA. And so that being a challenge, we talked a little bit about minimum qualifications and how that is a challenge in this space. We talked again about how the arts need to be a part of business and entrepreneurship. It can't just be, the accounting and sort of like those fundamentals that we tend to focus on. We have to teach people about the creative side. We talked about the MFA really being, we've said this for a long time, the MBA. We also talked about how this issue of having to have an MBA to teach on entrepreneurship space, how that it really can be seen through a diversity, equity, and inclusion lens, and we can look at that as itself potentially being discriminatory because of the access in our region to some of these folks that have MBAs or lack of access, and then that really creating an issue with the way that we're teaching, especially in the entrepreneurial space. So we talked about the systemic, issue there as well. We did have some folks from College of the Desert, and they talked about some of the workarounds that they're using. Non-credit is an opportunity for some of these things, and also things like dual enrollment. We talked about some examples in other regions where the teachers are all entrepreneurs, and how is it happening there? How can we make it happen here? And then we also talked about funding, how funding is a barrier for a lot of students. So partnering with businesses, and then I could go on all day, but I'll stop by saying, chambers are doing some good things with pathways in high schools, and that also we talked about how do we get businesses to come and sit at the table with us, which we all know is a real trick. And part of that, they were saying, like, we need to help them see how this is a pipeline for their workforce. So that's it for me. I hope I represented us well in the business group. Back to you, Michael.
Awesome. Thanks, Jackie. And I just must recognize the merging of what's needed in the pathways with some of the recovery with equity pieces around faculty diversity, around some of the pathways like dual enrollment.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to emphasize.
And we did bookend our conversation with that equity piece. Carlos put a really great comment in the chat about, sometimes we need to make sure that, just because we all think about equity and that's top of mind for us, we have to make sure that we're continuing to remember to keep that as part of the conversation, because this is about recovering with equity, not just recovering, period.
Absolutely. That's exactly correct. So glad, Jackie.
So thank you for the reminder, Carlos. Excellent post. Lots of good stuff happening in the chat.
Such good stuff. Looking at time, I know we're running short, so I want to move straight to healthcare. Healthcare folks, what was your discussion like?
As always, a really good conversation. I don't know if anyone in particular wanted to say, but as it ended, they said, "No, Emery, you're good. Like, just go with it." So I'll go with it. One of the things I wanted to bring up that applies to all the working groups is for us to really look at the systems change components, right? That there are significant areas where collaboration has occurred, but they need to be systematized, and particularly when talking about the recovery with equity components, right? So that it's looking at those policies and procedures to really figure out what we want to change in our region that could lead to positive outcomes. A lot of talk about public health, especially given pandemic recovery, significant needs in public health that the workforce development offices have identified, as well as EMT programs. Reach Out has some significant programs with school districts around mental health as well. And so the conversation then went into really the idea of a need for more healthcare pathways in K-12 schools, right? That there is a process set up of how to do that, but depending on which school district you're in, if you're, say you're Redlands Unified next to Loma Linda, there's a great health pathway. But if you're out in the Morongo Basin, not so much. So figuring out ways that we can connect those individuals together to provide support through this project. I'll leave it at that. Back to you.
Awesome. Thank you. It took me a second to find the unmute button. That sounds awesome. And I'm excited to hear a little bit more about healthcare, especially that mental health piece. I think is going to pay off dividends in different ways, even beyond just the pathways. Next is the engineering group. I know that was one of the smaller convenings, but sure you had a great conversation.
Yeah, so most of the participants, well, I should say all of the participants in the past have been from the community colleges, and today's a holiday for most community colleges. So we did not have any returning participants. I did have a nice conversation with Marl Hernandez from Cal State San Bernardino, and we talked a lot about the need for the right people being at the table for this conversation. So identifying we really need additional faculty and dean level administrators to be participating from both the community colleges and the four-year colleges and universities. We need to engage with IEDRC, the Inland Empire and Desert Regional Consortium, around this, industry representatives, the county workforce development agencies. I think the conversations we've had in the past are right on target with really just to reiterate the kind of three priorities that we've discussed in this group about building out articulation and transfer agreement between the community colleges and the universities in engineering and computing, increasing dual enrollment and articulation between K-12 and the community colleges, and expanding internships and apprenticeships across the entire K-16 space. But we are still missing all of the right people. So that's one of the things we're going to need to work on for this particular pathway. Marl, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, thanks, Michael. I think that some of our conversation, we discuss all of those things and then just really kind of laying it out to the group in terms of what other public agencies should be at the table that do have resources available and access to employers that can provide us that employee internship, apprenticeship-based voice, which is something that Michael and I discussed in terms of, I just noticed the last time the lack of the business participation, but also the county economic development departments, both in Riverside and San Bernardino counties, have great coordinators that work directly with businesses, and they should have some sort of a voice or some sort of participation in the meetings to kind of provide information to us, and so we can better make those connections between the pathways in education and to employment. So that was one part of our conversation as well. I really did appreciate all the time that I had with Michael. It's a really great conversation. Thank you.
Awesome. And I think to that very point that was mentioned, we need more folks to be part of this conversation. So if there are folks that you think that we should reach out to, please just let us know, but also spread the news and information. We have the links, they can watch the recordings, and we're ready to bring new folks on board. I know we're running out of time, so I'll keep it quick. Last is the education group. How was the discussion?
Hi, Michael. I was tapped to report out for this group. So really quickly, one of the big things we talked about was the importance of connective tissue between all of the 4 areas. One of those things we thought might be soft skills, or those how to be in the workplace or in the learning arena as you go towards your profession. We talked about seeing if Cal Soap as a way to get kids through the system and graduating from college might be beefed up across the Inland Empire and extended to include many more districts. We talked about the idea of wraparound kind of services, helping students as they move from the high school, community college, 4-year college and beyond, and that is something that we could actually think about, that kind of wraparound idea for each of the 4 areas as well, as kind of a way to provide extra service. We talked about the importance of trying to connect with community across each of our initiatives as a way to be sure that the entire support system for the student is on board. We had specific examples from Deanna about different partnerships Chaffey College is doing. A number of our folks, Cal Poly also described partnerships they are doing as well. We had James Moses talk to us about the importance of early childhood education. That's huge in the Inland Empire. And it certainly impacts where the kids go in terms of their trajectory. So that was another area we thought might be very rich. And let's see, the last little area. Let's see. I think that's pretty much it. We had lots of ideas popping even at the end. It was a very rich discussion. Great group.
As expected from the education group, which, as mentioned before, kind of what happens there could bleed into some of the other areas as well when we talk about teacher pipelines and similar topics. Thanks, Beth, for sharing from that group. Back to you, Anne-Marie.
Thanks so much. I know folks need to take off to their next calls with these Zoom meetings. We do them back to back, but just know that the links are in the chat. If you are able to complete the Google Doc that's listed, that's also a way to engage with other people and let us know that there are others that need to be on this call so we can reach out to them. Renee, you have a question?
Yeah, I just wanted to know for the Google Doc, because I know some of the people there, do we just put the information there for you to contact?
Please, yes. Okay. Yeah, absolutely. So that, and then also you make sure you advertise to bringing a friend, right? So get them on board so that everyone is registered. Have a wonderful weekend, everybody, and we will see you next time. Thank you.
1 o'clock. See you all next week, and at the webinar too. Bye.